It's 98.1 Lagos, Nigeria World. Welcome. It is gone past 7:30, and this is Freshly Pressed on Smooth Brekfast. I'm Sope Martins, and for the next half hour, I've got Ikemesit Effiong in with me to discuss the news that is weighing in on the national consciousness. Good morning, Ikemesit. How are you doing?
I'm very good, Sope. Good morning, Lagos.
All right, so Lagos, Nigeria World, wherever you are listening or viewing us from, because we are right now live up on youtube.com/smooth981 FM Lagos. You can join the conversation up on YouTube. You can leave a comment up on the live chat. You can also send WhatsApp messages into 0809 4440981, or you can take things over to Twitter and use the hashtag freshlypressed981. All right, so there you have it, the different ways that you can join the conversation and get your thoughts on the stories in, as we start off with the threat of strike. So let's get straight into that. From the Punch newspaper, airports, concession, aviation unions kick and threaten strike, with several of the unions starting to go on strike. This was Thursday morning, that they announced their intention. This is in protest against the concession plan of the federal government for 4 international airports and the demolition, they say, of the different agencies. Now, the government is to sell off Lagos, Abuja, Port Harcourt, and Kano airports, they have said, and they're vowing to resist those moves. And the Federal Ministry of Aviation had announced that Corporación America Airports Consortium was the preferred bidder for the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport. Now, Ikemesit, they issued a 7-day ultimatum to the Minister of Aviation to stop this. And they've also said that what happened to all the grand plans that the federal government had for the aviation industry? What happened to those? What projects have been implemented? And now they're seeing all sorts of moves happening in the last few months. Your thoughts?
Well, yeah, and the thing is, in theory, the idea of concession airports is not a bad idea at all. If you look at some of the better run airports, right, in the world, the best run airport in Nigeria is run by a private operator. I know not many people rate MM2 right here in Lagos, but compared to the level of service that you get from other airports right across the country, it easily stands above its peers, and it's been run subject to, the concession of the government to a private operator, right? So the real concern, though, that aviation unions have is just security. Right now, they have
the real concern they have is what?
Is job security. The fact that typically, when a new private operator comes, standards change, operational procedures change. And for many people, that often means job cuts and, employment, and the real concern, right, they have. And the government has not made guarantees around their jobs and their pensions, in addition to the obvious concerns about, government doing better, right, by the unions in terms of bumping up industry standards. The fact of the matter remains that government can do everything, and aviation is one of the sectors globally it's sensitive to market incentives, price mechanism, but service quality oftentimes is a distinguishing factor, right? Not just between airports, also between airlines, and that figures into the choice of passengers and consumers and flyers, right, in terms of which airports, they fly through and which airlines that they use. I don't think there's anyone that can make the arguments that domestic airports are even to their African peers. And so something drastic needs to be done in aviation, right? And really the government doesn't have the resources, right? Because there are so many other priorities that it has to take care of for it to really make the investment it deems necessary, right, within the airport sector. So personally, for me, I think the aviation unions in the end fighting, a lost battle, and their cause pretty much is lost from the beginning. But there are certainly things that the government can do in the short term in terms of maybe extracting commitments from, consultants from private operators who eventually win this concession to make guarantees around jobs, maybe a limited time period, or attractive welfare and incentive packages just to placate the unions. But in terms of them stopping the actual concessions of the airports, I don't think that they would be able to succeed in that cause. I think the era of government-run airports, in an era of austerity, inflation, high unemployment, high debt, I think that era has come to an end, really, and the government recognizes that.
Right. Okay, let's move on to our next story now, which comes in from the daily. Actually, no, there's still another one. Let's talk about the budget for the Nigerian Airspace Management Agency, NAMA. So the House of Representatives Committee on Aviation, has kicked against the exclusion of this Nigerian Airspace Management Agency from the 2023 budgetary allocation, and has asked the Minister of Aviation to give clarifications about that. Now, so the committee chairman, Lolim Naji, talked about NAMA being a critical safety arm of the aviation sector, which cannot be ignored, and also stressed that the Minister of Aviation, Senator Hadi Sirika, has to give clarification on the exclusion of NAMA from the 2023 federal budget.
Yeah, so the Nigerian Airspace Management Agency, the name implies, is one which is generally tasked managing the integrity of Nigeria's airspace, right? So, because the sky gets wide, it doesn't mean that it's fly anywhere or anyhow that they want, right? Our airspace has to be managed tightly. There are these things called flight corridors. So there are only a couple of ways in which, for example, to fly in and out of Lagos, right?
Hold on, Ikemesit. Now, just tying this into the previous story and part of why they issued this 7-day ultimatum. So they talked about the agencies, the intended demolition of 3 aviation agencies, of which the Nigerian Airspace Management Agency is one of that. So how does that play into this story then?
Very much so. There appears to be this coalescence, right, driven by the aviation minister around the idea of merging, right, and consolidating agencies within the sector. I think I once read him say something. There are almost a dozen, right, aviation agencies on the regulatory side, right, within the sector, and they honestly don't think that that's sustainable. The Aviation Ministry is not one of the top ministries in terms of the government's budgetary priorities, right, to begin with, right? And so, a lot of cost-cutting, efforts at cost-cutting, right, appears to be going on in the sector. And that's why, moves like, demolishing the offices of some of these agencies, mostly, within the Lagos, right, mostly within the Lagos airport periphery, and also things like, this exclusion, which the House of Representatives has basically said is probably a step too far, right? And the aviation minister needs to come in and justify why an entire agency will, in theory, not have any government allocated spending for, a whole financial year, right? Which is, even by Nigerian standards, almost unprecedented, right? And so the move appears to be geared toward getting these agencies to be more revenue driven and to be more revenue driven, right? But the thinking among some lawmakers is that certain agencies should be exempt from that effort. And this is where the overall government efforts around driving revenue generation can reach really dystopian and warped, right, proportions, right? And so an airspace management agency should not be subject to that kind of regime. It doesn't tally, and it doesn't tally and marry neatly with what you're asking the agency to actually accomplish, right? If my job is to ensure that the highways are in effect good and safe, and the prerequisites for safe flying is a prerogative, what's business with actually to generate revenue out of that kind of a cause? And so this particular issue will definitely, this is far from the last that we would hear, right? On the issue. This is budget reconciliation season, right? So ministers and agency heads are basically appearing for the House of Representatives, the Senate, to justify their budgetary spend for 2023. So believe that there are a few moving parts to this, right? And it's one that should watch closely.
All right, now, so let me get on to the next story. This one comes in from the Daily Post. Coalition hails efforts to halt infiltration of crystal meth in Southeast by NDLEA. So the coalition of Southeast youth leaders commending the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency on its successes in the ongoing war against illicit drugs in the country. Now, according to the statement from this coalition, for over 1 year now, we have not heard of cases of suicide influenced by the intake of hard drugs amongst our youth. This success story is one among the many successes recorded by the agency. It talked about the fact that the agency had helped or had done a commendable job in eradicating crystal meth, aka Mpuru Miri. Pretty sure I mispronounced that, but help me out if you can. But yes, Ikemesit, back to you now on this.
Yeah, very much so. The EA has been on this aggressive crackdown against not just drug abuse, but also the trafficking of drugs. I've mentioned right in the past that Nigeria is a major transshipment point, largely between South America, chiefly Brazil, right, and North Africa and Western Europe. But a decent proportion of the drugs, right, which ply through Nigerian waters, Nigeria's airspace, and also Nigeria's land territory, obviously, right, in effect in the country, right, and is consumed by Nigerians. And so the NDLEA, for the better part of 2 years actually, right, has been on this aggressive crackdown, and you are hearing reports of more arrests, more drug seizures, more prosecutions and more arrests, right, of key transshipment nodes and also key players and operators, right?
And also, Ikemesit, just to interject quickly, if you don't mind, the information dissemination aspect of it as well, because they talked about the introduction, their efforts to stop the introduction of fentanyl into the Nigerian markets just recently.
Yes, very much. Yes, so fentanyl is, until lately, it hasn't been one of those big, controlled substances, right, that's consumed by Nigerians, but there's been an uptick in the last few years. And the NDLEA, as well as associated agencies and even medical practitioners, I know the Nigerian Medical Association has come out to speak, about a spike in fentanyl cases. I also know doctors and medical practitioners also have in the past. They've gotten ahead, right, of the issue, and basically they've served a very important public education role in basically telling Nigerians, when you hear of the opioid crisis in North America, in places like Canada and the United States, in Central Europe, it's also fast rising, right, in pockets of Southeast and South Asia. Fentanyl, right, has been one of the chief culprits. And that's not a substance that you want entrenched in, in communities right down here in Nigeria, because if you think that, heroin and a lot of these other controlled substances are bad, you have not met fentanyl, right? So this is one of those situations where, we need to give the government, we also need to give, practitioners and advocates and activists, right, and organizations that are working in that space props for essentially working really hard at educating the public, not only about what they are doing to arrest the situation, but also about what the public needs to do in order to better manage and protect it. So this is probably as close as you get to a feel-good story for a
Friday. Right. Okay. This would be our Feel Good Friday story then. From the Vanguard newspaper, let's take a look at this next one. CBN seeks e-Naira onboarding at Lagos Trade Fair. So we heard from the corporate communications, the director of corporate communications over the Apex Bank, Mr. Osita Nwansobi, who stated the world is fast moving to a digitized economy and Nigeria cannot be found lagging. Hence the introduction of the central bank digital currency, the e-Naira, the first of its kind in Africa, ranking among the best in the world. But he also went on to talk about the transactions and gains of the e-Naira, saying that over 700,000 transactions worth about 8 billion Naira within its first year have been made, and 33 banks fully being integrated and live on the platform. Ikemesit, how would you say the e-Naira has fared since its introduction? And does the CBN have a point in trying to urge Nigerians to adopt the e-Naira a lot more than we're currently seeing?
So the use case for the e-Naira, I think, is one that has not been clearly articulated, and that's why, even though 8 billion Naira within its first year, 700,000 transactions, over 1 million customers, 33 banks, fully integrated, and 3,500 plus merchants are successfully registered on the e-platform, sounds impressive and sounds like, a lot has been going on. It clearly could have been more, just on a month-on-month basis, just to give you a sense, right, of what the e-Naira is up against. The value of POS transactions that were done in Nigeria just in September of this year was 735 billion Naira, right? So when you put, right, how far people have come in terms of, trusting and utilizing, other electronic forms of financial transactions against e-Naira. Now, the e-Naira is just a year in, so we have to cut it some slack. It's a tiny fraction. It's barely less than 1%, right, of what people, are doing just with POS transactions. If you're talking about instant payment transactions, so your electronic transfers that are done, either via USSD channels, so via short code, or, through banking apps, that number for September alone skyrockets to, about 32 trillion Naira. And so so those are the numbers, right, that, the e-Naira is stacked up against. And, for many advocates, they've been like, wouldn't it be better in an environment where, most Nigerians are either unbanked or underbanked, where adoption for electronic forms of transaction, while growing and rising, and you're seeing these heavy volumes, right, could do much better, seeing that Nigeria is still in many ways a cash-based society? Wouldn't it be better if we focused our efforts on, supporting already existing systems, making sure the technology works right almost all of the time, if not all of the time, and continuing to educate Nigerians, right, about, increasingly adopting, electronic forms of, financial transactions and integrating those into their everyday life, than introducing these brand new products that we have to learn and relearn again while we are still on this financial inclusion drive. So not many operators in that space will openly say it, but that's why you have the Ikemesit and the Freshly Pressed of the world to say these things, right? So the e-Naira not doing badly compared to other central bank, backed and digital currencies. but it's still very much in its embryonic stages, and that's why you see the CBN go to places like the Lagos Trade Fair, encourage market participants, encourage entrepreneurs, encourage people to continue to uptake. If it was a blockbuster product, they won't be doing this much market. Best believe.
All right, then let's just take a look at this message up on the YouTube platform from Felix, who says the NDLEA are trying in their crackdowns, but more praise should go to the communities and their leaders that use other measures to reduce the spread amongst youth in their areas. I do remember you can keep join the conversation up on not just youtube.com/Smooth981FM Lagos, but also on WhatsApp on 0809 440 981 and up on Twitter using the hashtag FreshlyPressed981. I'm bringing that up right now. All right, now we're gonna move on to the next article up to talk about, and this one comes in from the Punch newspaper. No attack on Kaduna Abuja highway. That's what the Commissioner for Internal Security and Home Affairs, Samuel Arawan, said in a statement issued in Kaduna, debunking the reports of an attack on that highway. And I'm going to quote him now, saying the attention of the Kaduna state government has been drawn to a widely circulated message raising alarm on an alleged blockade of the Kaduna Abuja road by bandits. The Kaduna state government wishes to firmly debunk this message and advises citizens to completely disregard the mischievous circulation, saying that it went on to say the government had been in constant touch with security agencies and was fully abreast of the security situation along the road and other situations. Ikemesit, your thoughts?
So right now it's a case of he said, and he said, she said, and or he said, right? More likely.
More likely, yeah.
Yeah, and the thing is, even if that's true, and that's the case, I'm not sure. I'm not sure this is the right way to communicate it, right? And I'll tell you why. So state authorities in Nigeria are fond of automatically assuming that if a particular report, right, isn't entirely accurate, they're fond of just labeling it as, mischievous and what were the words that mischievous and unfounded. People can be honestly misguided, right? Is it out of the realm of possibilities that there could have been an attack by bandits on the Kaduna-Abuja highway? No, that's the most security impacted pieces of roadway in the country. I mean, in the entire country.
If you're up on YouTube, you'll have seen Ikemesit carefully choosing his words and the facial expressions. Go ahead, Ikemesit.
Yeah, because morning radio is wholly unsuited to what I really want to say, which the Kaduna state government might actually have a legitimate reason to describe as mischievous, but definitely not unfounded. Right? The fact of the matter remains that, the Kaduna-Abuja transport corridor is one of the most dangerous to traverse, right, in the country. And it's also, it completely exists within the realm of possibility that attacks and security incidents have happened within that corridor. If none happened in this particular instance, all the internal security and affairs commissioner for that state should have said is, an attack did not happen in this case. Here is why. Here is our proof. And we enjoin and we ask the general public to be more circumspect in how they disseminate, right, and obviously untrue stories, not to basically gaslight the public for basically being on edge, because the government has still not sorted out domestic and internal security. That's not how to communicate to voters. And that's not especially how to communicate to voters when you're 3 months removed from a general election. I mean, don't these guys get it? That's where I will end.
Before you go too far, we've only got a few minutes left, so let's take it to our next story, because this is a big one, big numbers that we're talking about from the Guardian newspaper. Flood insurance claims may hit 1 trillion naira as stakeholders assess damage. So underwriting companies in the nation's insurance industry appearing to be in dire straits, and their woes compounded by the recent flooding disaster that's ravaged the majority of our states, resulting not just in the loss of life, which is devastating. And once you are without life, you don't need any of the other things, but also property for those who are still in the land of the living. And that property is coming with an estimated price tag of 1 trillion naira. So industry experts spoke with The Guardian and said that this number had been reached by the amount of property that had been damaged so far, but that they think it might actually be more because the actual picture would then come after assessments done by government agencies. But that's for people who were even insured.
Yeah, and an uptake for insurance products in Nigeria, typically wobbles between 1% and 2%, depending on the given year that you're looking at. And so the actual monetary cost of this, of these flooding disasters, which has affected every geopolitical zone, almost every state, right? Mm. And I think something like almost, 500 local governments right across the country could actually be more. This is the estimated loss for people who took out insurance. So, people, for example, like the agricultural conglomerates, which have, farms, right, and industrial agricultural operations in states like Nasarawa and Plateau and Benue, or for people who had their buildings and property insured and all of that. But the vast majority of Nigerians who are poor, can't afford insurance, don't even know in many cases about the existence of these insurance offerings, and are in parts of the country which are predominantly rural and generally do not see a lot of uptake for many financial products, let alone insurance. The cost is a lot more. And again, over 600 people have died. And it's what's right and restating what the human cost of this tragedy has been. So it's tragedy all around, right? And whichever way you look at it. And it's not clear, governments both at the federal and at the state level haven't exactly come out to say, right, if there is a plan for, compensation or, economic alleviation for affected communities and affected persons. And so, if anything, the aftermath of this disaster might be every bit as painful and every bit as worrisome and every bit as and every bit as bad, right, as the actual flooding now occurred.
My goodness. In the words of, I'm even trying to find the quote that says it all, basically saying that you need to wait until after the waters recede to see the extent of the true damage. Oh, my goodness. So our prayers and our thoughts go out to those who have been affected. I mean, the souls of those who passed away in these floods, rest in peace. Let's take a look at your messages. I'm going to go over to WhatsApp. I'll also be up on YouTube. So, and Twitter, of course, hashtag freshlypressed981, which I'm up on already. So going over to WhatsApp now on 0809 44440. This, it'll be the messages that end the show because we've come to that point. Idima Puza from Surulere says, okay, the wrong timing of the Naira redesign is going to be the last straw that determines who Nigerians vote for. How interesting. AJ from Alimosho says, the average uptake of the e-Naira should be expected at the earliest stage of introduction. I'm picturing a duration of 2 years, then the CBN's input towards cashless exchanges in neighborhoods will have started to be obvious. D from Alausa says, Innovation can occur simultaneously and not necessarily one after the other. Therefore, eNaira can't wait for other digital products to be fully developed. The more, the merrier, and the customers are better off for cheaper and more efficient services and options. And Roland from Agbara says, can someone tell me what the eNaira is all about? Is it a cryptocurrency? It's actually a digital currency. And it's what the CBN is trying to say, okay, you know what? Paper money costs money. So let's try and take things digitally and increase security and all whatnot. Ikemesit, has been a blast having you on the show. And what was it that you said? That there are some things that people can't say in the media, but we leave it to Ikemesit. What was that? Something along those lines. Paraphrasing here.
You have the Ikemesit of the world to say the things.
Right, there you go. You have the Ikemesit of the world. And you can find this Ikemesit of the world up on Twitter. He is at Judge Ike on Twitter. So make sure you find him. Make sure you tackle him on any of these topics and even so much more. He's always up there tweeting the infographics and sharing what he's doing with data gathering and intelligence in Nigeria and outside. All right, Ikemesit, have a fantastic weekend. That's it for Freshly Pressed. Till next Friday. Goodbye.
Of course. Goodbye. Thanks, Sope.